suppliers, manufacturers, this wouldn't be possible without you. Great thanks to Bob and Andrew and the Film Expo Group team. Trust me, in the run to the show, I talked to these guys more than I talked to my own mother. And I talk to her quite often, so that's just, so you know. And to my very own team, they're doing a great job. And for the past weeks, we've been breathing, eating, sleeping, dreaming Cine Europe. So as you can imagine, we are happy and relieved to be here today. So before we start our morning session, I would like to thank this morning's breakfast sponsor, 4DX and ScreenX. Yet another proof on how cinema operators around the world continue to invest in groundbreaking innovation. And to tell you more about it, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Theodore Kim.
Thank you, Laura, for the nice introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Theodore Kim, Chief Partnership Activation Officer for CJ40plex. It is an honor to be here and greet you all once again this year. I hope you all had enjoyed today's breakfast and ready to start a spectacular week. Before we start, let's just please allow me to introduce you two of our technologies, 4DX and ScreenX. In 2009, we've launched our first business, 4DX, an innovative multisensory cinematic technology. We've since established ourselves as the leading platform in delivering unique, immersive experiences to a worldwide audience. As one of the fastest growing premium movie formats, 4DX is currently available in more than 530 locations in 59 countries with 73 exhibitors partners around the globe. With fantastic support from Hollywood studios, 4DX has screened more than 530 films in the format. Not just with the footprint, 4DX has also grown in connecting with audiences around the world. In 2017, 4DX films attracted nearly 20 million moviegoers. As we released Avengers: Infinity War, we have already surpassed the 10 million mark April this year. With upcoming exciting 4DX lineup like Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, Ant-Man and the Wasp, The Meg, Skyscraper, we hope to set a bold but yet a new record in 2018. 4DX has been proven to be a success with Hollywood blockbusters, but also we found a solid place within the European film market, where we have 89 locations in Europe alone and will grow to 123 by the end of this year. Last year, we have started to convert local movies into 4DX in conjunction with local European studios. Titles include Overdrive, Valerian of the City of a Thousand Planets, Hurricane Haste, Jungle Punch, and Paddington 2. Taxi 5, which is a fantastic movie, a French action blockbuster released in 6 European countries, including France, Switzerland, Belgium, Croatia, Serbia, and Ukraine, was tremendously successful. It recorded an average occupancy rate of 44% for the full run, far exceeding the industry average during the same period. ScreenX is our latest innovation. This immersive technology is a multi-projection system that provides a 270-degree view. It uses the side acoustic panels as additional screens for the panoramic experience. Since ScreenX debut in 2012, we've screened a total of 32 films from a variety of genres, titles, and countries. A few of our Hollywood titles include Kingsman, The Golden Circle, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, Rampage, and our most recent success, Black Panther. In addition, ScreenX is set to release anticipated blockbusters such as Aquaman, Shazam, and many more. In terms of coverage, there are currently 142 theaters in 8 countries equipped with ScreenX. For the first time in Europe, we are very happy to announce that we will be opening 4 ScreenX theaters in France and Switzerland. These 4 theaters are set to open midsummer this year. Additionally, in Paris, Barde will introduce Europe's first 4DX with ScreenX, which is a combination of both amazing technologies of 4DX and ScreenX at the same auditorium. For those of you who have not experienced ScreenX yet, please visit us at our meeting room at 122. Our team will be very happy to provide you a virtual experience of ScreenX through our VR equipment. Thank you very much for listening, and please enjoy the seminar and the rest of the trade show. Once again, thank you.
Thanks, Fyodor. And now on to our first session of the morning. To deliver the opening remarks, I would like to invite on stage Lucia Recalde, Head of the Media Unit, European Commission. Thanks, Lucia, again for your support and your partnership.
Thank you, Laura. Bon dia, buenos dias, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the European Film Forum at Cine Europe in Barcelona, in partnership with UNIC. And first of all, I would really like to thank UNIC for the good collaboration in the organization of this panel session, and also to our distinguished panelists for being here with us today. We really look forward to your input. The title of today's session couldn't be more relevant: the business case for European content, because it clearly illustrates what we will say call the European dilemma when it comes to audiovisual content. Are movies an art, and as such, an expression of our cultural identity, or is a double-digit industry focusing on return on investment? We at the European Commission are convinced that it's both. Commercial success and cultural diversity should go hand in hand. And this is precisely what makes the European industry, film industry, so unique. So to promote both the competitiveness of the industry and its cultural diversity, the European Union has used a combination of legislation, policy support, and funding. And for those of you who might know us well enough, let me say a few words about the EU program in support of the film industry, Creative Europe Media. Media provides financial support for the development, the distribution, and the promotion of European films, focusing on non-national European films. And the program really believes in the crucial role of European cinemas in the value chain. This is why, for the last 26 years now, the European Commission has supported the network of Europa Cinemas Network that gathers today more than 2,000 films operators in more than 675 countries. And this action is considered the jewel of the crown and one of the most successful success stories of this European program. Our program Media is small in size. It has a budget of approximately 110 million euros on an annual basis, but sometimes small is beautiful. And it has been really a nice breaker in really instilling change in the audiovisual industry at European level. And today, I'm coming here with very good news, because Media will continue after its current financial framework, which will come to an end 2020. The European Commission has put forward a very ambitious proposal with a budget of 1.2 billion for the period 2020-2027, which represents almost a 30% increase compared to its current budget. And this is an unprecedented increase, especially in the context of Brexit. And the message for the industry is very obvious and very important. The European Commission is fully committed to supporting the European audiovisual industry in the context of the digital single market. But at the same time, there should be no hide. There is a need to adapt EU support to reflect new market trends and make it fit to the digital age. The European audiovisual industry is recognized for its quality, but is not competitive enough. I just would like to share with you some figures. The European Union produces over 1,700 movies per year against 800 in the US. But the European Union or the European does not make the most of this production volume because, above all, of its limited distribution and promotion potential. And on average, the marketing expenses of an American production amount to 50% of the total production cost, against, for example, 10% for French movies. So against this backdrop, we believe that there is a very strong business case for European movies, but one that requires significant changes in the way films are promoted and distributed in Europe. And that means that we need to adapt our European support to address those changes. So concretely, what is going to be new in the future media program of the European Union? We see 4 main drivers of change. The first one is a stronger focus on audience, what we call an audience-first approach. We would like to instill this audience-first approach in all the actions of the program. We would also like to introduce a success bonus to reward those films that are able to attract substantial audiences internationally. We also would like to expand the Europa cinema networks, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, and to cover more small and medium-sized cities all over the Union. The second driver of change is networking and collaboration. We are convinced that collaboration across the value chain between producers, distributors, sales agents, and exhibitors is a must, as each actor remains dependent on the others for its own success. So we want to take this collaboration to the next level to make our support more systemic and impactful. The third driver of change is innovation and experimentation to take advantage of the new digital technologies. And we would also like to support cinemas themselves to embrace innovation, to make the big screen experience as attractive as possible. And in particular, we would like to work hand in hand with cinema operators to experiment with big data. And last, but certainly not least, we want to focus more decisively on promotion and marketing. We will give priority to coordinated European distribution strategies, funding more promotion and market activities, and concentrating in particular on those European movies that have a potential for attracting large audiences. And this structured promotion support will also enhance the commercial success of European films abroad in key global markets. We are convinced that through these actions in the future, media can contribute to the competitiveness of the audiovisual industry in Europe. And in this perspective, we very much look forward to working with UNIC to make sure that our funding strategy remains interesting for the industry and also for the great benefit of the European audiences. But the negotiations on the EU budget have just started. The ball will now be soon in the camp of the national governments and the members of the European Parliament that will either confirm or change the Commission budget proposals. And you can also play a very important role in this process by supporting us in the discussions with the European Parliament and also with your national government, but letting us know about your successes or anything that you can believe can make our case stronger. So thanks again for your attention, and thanks in particular to UNIC for making it happen. And now I would like to give the floor to the moderator of this session, David Hancock, who is here with us, Director of Research and Analysis for Cinema, Home Entertainment, IHS. David, the floor is yours.
I'll start up here, I think. Thank you, Lucia, and thanks for asking me to moderate today's session. So the session is called The Business Case for European Content. And some of you who know me in another context, I won't do that again, will wonder why I'm here. Why is he talking about this? He talks about cinema technology normally, doesn't he, and cinema exhibition. Before I started at Screen Digest 21 years ago, I used to be a young researcher in France, and then I was a funder of films through Euromage, the public fund in Strasbourg. So I had three and a half years doing that. I would have been the producer's worst nightmare because my job was to get money back off them, but no one ever repaid us, so it turned out okay in the end. But today's session, it's sort of building on that. You know, when I left that world, it was a pretty simple world: theatrical, TV sales, pre-sales, and then some video. It was video, not even DVD. So that's a pretty simple world, and the world since then has moved on a lot. But the discussions we had back then were fairly similar to what we have now. It's about, I used to phrase it, commerce versus culture. It's all about commercial reality and the need to make money, but also about respecting artistic and cultural integrity. And that sort of dichotomy seems to still be there within the European sector and the European market. So we thought it would be a good idea to try and explore some of those themes, to try and build on what Lucia just talked about, which is her ambitions for the new media programme with the budget increases they have, and try and explore some of those themes within this session to try and understand maybe what are the European characteristics, what are the strengths underneath all of what we do that can be built on. So to that end, we have a panel of 4 very excellent people. I met them before. I knew some of them, but I met some of them before. I had a quick chat. They're all on the same wavelength. Don't all agree, that's true, but that's good. That's a good thing. So I'd like to invite to the stage. They're going to introduce themselves in a minute. So I'll just say their names and they wander up. So Isabel, John, Asger, and Anna, if you'd like to come to the stage and take a seat. Thank you. So Asger is the token cinema exhibitor. That's Asger. That's his role today.
Let's see if this works. Good morning, everybody. My name is Asger Flygøyer. I'm CEO of Nordisk Film Cinemas. And before that, I worked for the other branches of Nordisk Film. I work with production, post-production, and distribution. And our distribution both distribute local Scandinavian titles as well as US titles. And today we also distribute our Fox in the Scandinavian territory.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Anna. I work for Studio Canal and I run international distribution. So as part of international distribution, it encompasses international sales and direct marketing and sales, theatrical distribution in our territories. Studio Canal is part of the Canal Plus group, which was owned by Vivendi Entertainment, which is a European-based company on the CAC 40. And allows us to really leverage from an incredible value chain across entertainment, whether that be music, gaming, television, or of course film.
John?
My name is John, and I'm a film producer. My background is that when I was 15 years old, I was given the job of programming a suburban small cinema outside Oslo. When I was 17, I quit school to go to work for Universal Pictures in Oslo. And if you had access to the organizational chart of Universal in 1962, you would have found that on the very, very top was Lou Wasserman, and on the very, very bottom was me. I was sweeping the floor in the shipping department at their smallest branch office in the world. And in 1983, I started to produce, made my first movie, and I've been going on with that for 35 years. I was head of the Norwegian Film and Television Producers Association for 17 years, and I've been on the board of the European Producers Club and FIAP, the International Producers Association.
Good morning, I'm Isabel. I am head of international for the BFI. The BFI obviously is the lead agency for film in the UK. And my job involves looking after all the international dependencies of British film insofar as the BFI is in a position to help that. So that includes co-production, the international promotion and distribution of films. And I'm also an executive within the Film Fund team. So I'm also involved in the decisions around the types of films that we fund at the development and production stage. We're very proud recently to have supported Paweł Pawlikowski's Cold War, a Polish-French-British co-production that was just in Cannes, and Paweł took away Best Director.
Thank you. So that gives them gives you an idea of why they're on the panel, you know, their background, who they are. To start with, I'd just like to ask Isabel, as the B word's been mentioned, would you like to just talk about Brexit quickly and the impact of Brexit on maybe European content?
I hope this is still obvious. It hasn't happened yet.
What's the time? No, not yet, no.
Yeah, the impact for now is that we're spending a lot of time working on Brexit at the BFI. We heard very clearly that, you know, surveys and votes and what have you from the creative industries will tell you very clearly that 95% of people in our business didn't vote for Brexit. So that gives you a very strong constituency wanting us to do everything we can to get the best outcome for British film, but also we're extremely aware of the interdependencies of British film with the rest of Europe and internationally. So we are engaged very much at the moment talking to our own government and to our colleagues and friends across Europe to make sure that we can continue to be part of European film. Of course, we're not leaving Europe, we're leaving the EU, apparently. So we are doing everything we can to ensure the best outcome for all concerned.
Thank you. I thought it was just worth clearing that up. Then we can move on from Brexit, like we will do in 2 years' time.
Last time you mentioned it.
Yeah, last time. So I'd like to start with some definitions, really, just defining a couple of things that we talked about in the summary of this session. The first one being European content, and the second one being success. So I'd like to ask the panel, what do you think European content means? You know, do you make, John, European content?
In my opinion, European content is not an American movie shot in Europe, financed by European money. European film is a film that reflects European culture, European language, and European background.
Okay, Anna, is finance involved in European content?
No, absolutely. I would say that Studio Canal, who also is producing essentially European content, we pride ourselves in telling European stories. And I think the world really needs to hear something different. We need to differentiate ourselves, of course. The studios are doing what they do so fantastically, but we also have a real opportunity with also some growing middle class, I think, in Asia, who are starting to become a lot more interested in Europe, our stories, and I'd particularly have a wink to China. So there definitely is a market out there and an audience who want to listen to European stories. That may be, I mean, Europe is an incredible, has an incredible well for IPs, obviously a rich history, a literature. So there's so much to take from. We're very, very lucky, and we need to draw from that.
Isabel, where does the nation fit into European content? How much is national and how much is European?
I think that, of course, you know, a film is a film, and a British film can mean a multitude of things, as can European. And I absolutely second, you know, what Anna has said about the depth and richness of European cinema, and the fact that there's something really inherently of cultural goods coming out of European cinema. I mean, I feel like I'm still sort of reverberating from some of the films I saw in Cannes this year. Girl, out of Belgium, Paweł's film, obviously. Haven't got to see Border yet, but I hear it's phenomenal. Garrone, back on form with Dogman. I mean, there is a wealth and almost a well of renewal that comes out of European cinema. That's the artistic side. I think it's also really important for everyone in the room who isn't already aware, and of course we've been making a bit of a study of this in the UK recently for reasons that have just been mentioned, but there is a legal definition of a European work, and that's what underpins a lot of European circulation of films, so a definition that sits within the European Convention on Transfrontier Television, that gives films beyond the EU European work status, and that's something that is incredibly important because it's what determines whether the content can be shown as part of European broadcast quotas. So anyone who's a distributor and exhibitor needs to understand that that's the basis of it. And of course it means works that are made with support from the Creative Europe programme. So again, I think that's another definition in currency that if a film is eligible for media support, i.e. that the member state contributing is part of that programme, then that also has a huge impact on whether or not we can see films as European from a technical perspective, but a really important technical perspective.
Do you have a view, Oscar?
Well, I must admit I won a place in this panel by being a little skeptical about European content, but let me refine that a little bit.
Good.
What we really need, and what I feel we need as exhibitors, is really strong local content. And since Europe is a region of many countries, I think that the national content is actually European content. I really recognize that Studio Canal has been very successful in fielding very good movies, but I do challenge a little that the size of the company also matters here, because the size of the budget is also very important to what quality we receive in exhibition and in how many territories it will go. And I would maybe like Anna to reflect a little about the sizes of the risk that you have to take as a producer, taking the equity of producing films like, for example, Paddington.
Thank you. No, indeed, it is a real challenge, obviously. We're part of a huge company, as I said before, and we do have to go up and greenlight our movies and convince our board to do so. So whilst we're asked to produce European content, and clearly we're doing that because we believe that there is a market for that, the calculations are absolutely fundamental. So what is the risk that our board are taking in putting sizable money behind a film like Paddington? I mean, you know, a film like Paddington is costing us north of $60 million. Clearly, we are doing this alone, but it's not without everybody's support in this room. We have confidence in our direct markets, which are UK, France, and Germany. We are taking a punt at how many cinema goers are going to buy tickets. So how does that waterfall look, and what is the profit on bottom line? Because otherwise we're not going to go through and produce, of course. We're lucky enough to have pre-sales in each of those key territories in terms of television, but there's no DVD pre-sale these days, as you were mentioning before. You're rolling the dice to hope that, for example, on iTunes, 4 months after the release, you know, consumers are going to be out there clicking and streaming our movie with the window that is necessary between theatres, obviously, in digital distribution.
Of course.
Thanks for
Very
that.
important, very important.
Of course.
I think we're getting to that later. So that's one thing. We are exposed in three territories in Europe, as I said, UK, France, and Germany, and also Australia. On the other side of the coin, what we tend to do is go early to the sales market. So we'll go to Cannes 2 years ahead of the release of Paddington, for example, and we will sell rights against an MG. So we have distributors like ourselves who will themselves roll the dice and put up in advance, which is great. That gives us an extra buffer within our budget. And the contribution of those international sales is very high. I won't give you the percentage, but it's certainly muscular, if I may, as a woman. And then I guess the big elephant in the room, or the big question mark, is the US. And I know that this is part of what we'll talk about later, but having 3 territories exposed where we're releasing directly, buffered by a few TV sales, we're also exposed in many ways to what we can expect from the US market. And I think we all know that sales can go from 0 or maybe 50K as an MG right up to tens of millions. And, you know, often you're reading about these deals in the trades around the Cannes Film Festival that can go anywhere between 5, 10, or maybe even $20 million. But you just don't know. It really is a crystal ball. And I think that a lot of the difficulty we have in financing these European movies is to tick the boxes for the European market, tick the boxes for what the Asian market wants, and then also satisfy the US market and the US audiences to ensure that the US distributors, and often independents, are ready to take a punt and put money up against the US in form of an MG on European movies.
But you can do it without.
Sorry, that was a bit long.
Sorry. You can do it without an MG from the US distributors.
Absolutely. I mean, you can make a movie with no MGs at all and roll the dice, which is what the US studios do. But then they have amazing, you know, TV output deals around the world, which give them a buffer.
And they own them as well.
Yeah, but and also I would just say, don't forget that the US distributor. I mean, to release a movie in the US, you need tens of millions of P&A. You know, in France, P&As are 10% of that. Terry.
Yeah. So just rowing back a sec. We're going to go into more detail on that. The second area I wanted to define was success. You know, the word success. What does that mean? So it could mean commercial. It could mean artistic. It could mean getting a film made at all. Lucia mentioned there's 1,700 films, 1,772 films made in Europe in 2016. About a fifth were co-productions, so that's quite successful in terms of making films. That's quite an industrial scale of production. When you look at how many achieve box office success, it's relatively few. When you look at how many achieve cross-European box office success, it's even fewer actually. And I'm going to ask Anna actually at this point to say, that statistic you had about the number of films?
Oh yeah, we looked at how many films grossed over $2.5 million in each France, UK, and Germany. In the last 8 years, so since 2010, and we found there were 480 films that achieved that number, which is a decent box office, we thought. Of those, how many were European? Well, actually just less than 10%. So in essence, 42 films in the last 8 years have grossed consecutively 2.5 in UK, France, and Germany, and 12 of those were released by majors. So when you actually break it down, you've probably got 1 or 2 films in each of those categories which are really going to generate significant box office, whether they be action movies, family, or European sort of drama prestige. So the challenge really is to increase that number and try and have more movies generate that box office, more European movies, of course.
And what was the other stat? The one about how many films? So
outside of those, that nuts of European countries, so outside of UK, France, and Germany, there were around 85 movies, European movies, which grossed more than $20 million in the last 8 years. So that's not so many either. And 44 of those films were actually pure European stories, as you were saying. Some of the others may have been Lucy or Taken or Non-Stop, which we made, which are European, but really doing more of the same of what the US studios are doing.
Yeah. So given those numbers, and I have some more I could put in, but I won't because it would bore you. But I was going to ask John, what do you think, as a producer, how do you define success? What are you looking to get out of it to say, yes, that was a successful project?
Well, I have a very simple mind. I like audience first, which we just heard about from the media. I've always advocating that we have to look after the audience first, and when we have managed to secure a solid base of enthusiasm for local movies, then we can devote ourselves to the smaller ones. If we don't have the large audience, we're going to lose political support over time, because why should the politicians support something that nobody's interested in? Norway is a very interesting case in that respect, because when I started out, the wet dream among filmmakers in Norway was to get a 10% market share. The first 10 years that I was producing, we never reached that figure. This year, we have a chance of achieving a 30% market share. And that is because the Norwegian support system, to some extent, has been geared towards films that have a potential to reach a large audience. And it just proves that it is possible.
So for you, evidently, the audience is at the heart of it, but that obviously translates as well into money. So commercial success is fundamental to what we're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, in my opinion, we're talking about commercial success, but commercial success can also breed artistic success. There is a simplification in this way of thinking that commercial success is necessarily a simple-minded movie. Or, you know, Jaws is a major technical and artistic achievement, but it was also a huge box office success. Mm-hmm. There is nothing contradictory in that.
Okay. Isabel, how would you, from the BFI, from a public funding point of view, how do you measure success? How do you view it?
Well, market share is certainly one of our measures, and but I guess as the National Public Fund, we've refocused both our audience fund and our production fund recently. In fact, having renamed the production distribution fund the audience fund, you can tell where we're going to in terms of audiences. The specific challenges we find in the UK, which you'll be familiar with, are the fact that the audience is getting older and older, and we are very, very determined to find new audiences and encourage the industry to come to us to find new audiences. So for us, that's part of the measure of success as well. Like, have you managed to engage with a new audience? Anyone who comes to us for distribution or production, of course, also has to make the case for what is your audience. You know, we're not necessarily looking for full quadra movies, although those would be nice, but we're looking for a realistic but focused attempt from the filmmakers, you know, to understand who this story is for. And we would say, I guess, in terms of the films that we've supported, and by the way, I mean, I think that Paddington is a work of absolute genius. You know, it's a work of art as well as, you know, being a fantastic international success on every level. But I guess the films that we are most proud of that would be considered successes have been ones that both prove the need to encourage our filmmakers as they're coming through to be as bold as possible, to make the most authentic expression of their story that they possibly can, because in the end, that is what's going to give them their point of difference in a very, very crowded marketplace. So a film such as Lady Macbeth, which obviously didn't only do well in the UK, but did fantastically well relative to its budget and the relative unknownness of its talent, it also travelled across Europe. The same with God's Own Country, you know, telling us such a powerful love story but set in an unfamiliar community, but telling a gay love story, made that film embraced not only within Europe but across the world. I mean, I think even in China, I mean, not in an official capacity, but that film has been really, really embraced by its community. So telling very specific stories to specific communities can also really work. And of course, we're very, very proud that a film like that should connect with such a wide audience.
Hanska, you must look at, so public funding has always been very heavy towards production. They focus on production funding. And Isabel mentioned it's moving, you know, they're shifting towards production distribution. Lucia also mentioned that they're trying to shift towards a more rounded view. You must look at public funding for production quite jealously and think, why is that money not coming to exhibition? Yes or no? Probably no.
If exhibition is going to get public funding?
I don't know, that's what I'm saying. Why shouldn't it? If it's about the audience and everyone agrees it's about audiences, then the majority of public funding goes into production, not audiences.
Well, I haven't really reflected on that one. Honestly, it's never been, I haven't really seen that's the case. Of course, I guess around Europe, communities want to support their local cinemas. And in that sense, if local municipalities are supporting it, it's public funding in a way. But it's also to make sure that from production to distribution, that there's a wide network of cinemas around Europe. So in that sense, then there is probably a public funding today. It's hard to see, for me, how public funding for the large commercial networks would work, actually. And honestly, we are already receiving public funding through the soft money that goes into film production. And on that one, also adding to the discussion before about box office versus quality, I concur with John on that one. And we also have to remember that we want to serve a wide audience in the cinemas. We want to serve all the market groups or the target groups we have in our territories. And for that, we need a broad spectrum of movies. And when it comes to funding, I think it's very important to take notice of the point John came with, that if you do public funding, you do have to do both talent development, and that means new directors never made a movie before, as well as fund big movies that would actually attract a large audience and make it attractive for the audience to see the movies from the territories.
So public funding is trying to balance that mix between funding commercial success or helping commercial success and then helping new talent emerge.
But let's be realistic here. Europe is a number of smaller territories, and public funding offset the problem with scale. If you don't have a large market to earn the production cost home from the movie, you have a problem, and therefore public funding is absolutely necessary in the smaller territories.
Okay, Anna, how do you?
I just wanted to say something to that as well, because it sounds like Studio Canal only make the big European movies like Paddington. we certainly do, but we also pride ourselves in supporting the smaller ones, and definitely what you said about supporting first-time directors, young talent that can grow into those bigger movies actually couldn't be done without the help of the likes of the BFI. And I'd like to just mention the film called Yardi, which is Idris Elba's first dive into directing. Did fantastic, had fantastic reviews in Sundance and in Berlin, and I think supporting that young talent, even stars like Idris, allowing them to make their first movie and hopefully moving on to something bigger and better is super important. And I would just end with the fact that just listening to everybody, don't forget that some of the smallest investments can actually sometimes be the most risky. That kind of middle ground, let's say 5 to 10 million, it's not because it's a small budget, quote unquote, that you're not taking risk. Sometimes you can actually lose more than you do on the bigger movies where you're getting those big TV sales and the big MGs out of international sales. So keep that in mind. There's risk everywhere.
Yeah, no, fair enough. That's a good point. But as one of the larger European production entities, how do you view soft money? Well, public funding, not soft money, because that's always termed as no repayment. But public funding, does it help you compared to some of your US counterparts, or is it just
no, absolutely. Absolutely. When you're looking at financing 100% of your movie, plus obviously an ROI, which we all have to keep our jobs. Public funding is a super important part of that, and for the big films as for the small. And I think that if we're abandoning that, and if we're sticking our nose up away, we're not going to be getting anywhere. And I think also we need to listen to our audience and work with the public funding entities to understand what they want to get out of it and how we can help them grow and support the local movies.
Yeah, okay. John, in Norway, you use public money. Is it fundamental to what you do?
Without public money, there would be no Norwegian film at all. So that's the end of story. But regarding this issue about films playing in other European countries, about 5 years ago, we did something that people told us was not possible. We actually made the first Norwegian car racing movie about an illegal street race going from Oslo to the North Cape. Huge success.
I'd watch it.
Then we made the follow-up, which was an illegal street race from the west coast of Norway into Murmansk in Russia. Even huger success. Now we have said to ourselves, let's try to do something that nobody has ever done before. We're going to take this concept, we're going to race the cars from the mountains of Norway to Germany and end up at Nürburgring. And we are testing ourselves, saying, is it possible for us to make a Norwegian movie that is a commercial success in Germany? That's our target.
That's the challenge. Okay, good. Well, report back next year how it goes. So you're actually building a franchise there. You're doing what American studios do, building a franchise.
We're building franchise like Studio Canal is with padding.
Sounds like the Norwegian Fast and Furious.
It does, yeah. And highly illegal as well, by the way. So don't tell anyone you're doing it. Okay, so that's success, I think, and it's brought in some of the other concepts as well. So the world I was in, film funding, was very simple. The world now isn't very simple at all. Independent financiers, there's obviously quite a few around. There's some who have a greater attitude towards risk. Quite a lot have a global attitude as well. But there's also other financiers, such as the streaming companies, Amazon and Netflix. So how do the panel here, how do they view the entry of those people into the film funding world? Not just distribution, but the funding world. Is that changing the model? Yes, John. John, carry on. Yeah.
I think what's most interesting about this development is Reed Hastings saying, a couple of months ago, we don't care about subtitles. Make the programs in any way you like. We think the audience don't really care about it. It's when I say don't care about it, they are ready to accept it. I have never actually believed in this theory that films with subtitles don't work in America. And the proof is Dances with Wolves, which was basically in the Sioux language. Huge success. The audience will accept subtitles if they want to go and see the film.
But so Netflix, I think it was Netflix, they made a production called The Rain, which is a Danish production, actually, Danish TV drama, which was in English. As far as I understand, they made it in English because they didn't want subtitles. Is that correct or not? Asger, do you know?
Yes, that is correct. And I must say, as an exhibitor, my mind is a little split. My mind is a little split here, because one, of course, I want our talent to make feature films that goes in our network. But then you also have to recognize that the money that goes into to the film environment or the production environment is maintaining the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is both studios, it's post-production facilities, and it's also the training of the professionals that we need to make feature films. So I'm a little split here. It's okay they do it part-time, but I would really like them to dedicate all their resources and intelligence to making feature films.
Okay. Anna, yeah.
So just on the streaming platforms, I have two examples of how we've worked with both Amazon and Netflix quite recently. The first is a film called Radioactive, which is directed by Marjan Satrapi, and about Marie Carey's discovery of radioactivity. That movie, which is purely squarely European, I don't think you have more European than that, has actually been we co-financed with Amazon Studios. They put up half the budget. They are distributing directly in theatres with a real theatrical window in the US. Studio Canal will be distributing in our territories and, of course, selling around the world. So there are, I think, ways to collaborate and in some ways embrace what could have been our enemies and become friends. And that's, on a case-by-case basis. It's not going to be on every movie, but it was a way to put more money behind a European film, ensure we solidify and guarantee theatrical distribution in the US before the production started shooting. So that was a fantastic example, and actually it's, fingers crossed, has been a wonderful process from A to Z. The other, the other example is a sale we recently made to Netflix for a European movie called the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which has done almost £6 million in the UK and will get close to $10 million down in New Zealand and Australia. So half the world will release theatrically this movie, and the other half of the world will be on Netflix. We sold the film as a finished movie to Netflix for the US, Canada, Latin America, and a few other territories. They were ready to put up the most money. They believed in the movie. And in fact, we were very worried about how our distributors would react to that sale. Are they going to support the film and release it theatrically, having a US release on Netflix? And the good news to that was yes. Everybody's behind the film. It's a great movie that deserves to be seen in theatres. But on the other hand, financially, you know, we needed that Netflix sale to come out whole.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. So the distribution side of that element, they have global distribution platforms. Netflix is global now. It's in 100 and whatever countries. Studios are global. They're the only global theatrical distribution networks. And studios take 67% of the world's box office. So obviously that global nature of their business means that they can push their films out and, you know, they make money back from it. Can we replicate that in Europe? Is there a way to do that or not? And is it, if Netflix and Amazon are doing it on a streaming basis, they're making a global business, which means also a pan-European business. You know, is that the way for films to be seen on a pan-European basis in future, or is there still a theatrical ambition to make pan-European content? Asger, you're an exhibitor. Tell us what you think.
All right, that was a long one.
I know, as I went along, I was making it up, so.
Well, honestly, I do not really have an opinion on that one. Honestly, I think that question will be best referred to Anna.
Yeah.
Lovely, well done.
I thought so much.
Nicely done.
Okay, here I go. I think instinctively, probably one of the answers may be partnerships. Studios are strong because they do have, you know, those global deals. So in Europe, we are sort of piecemealed in many ways across, you know, many countries, 27 plus. So I think that we need to think about partnerships in the future. You know, coming together, maybe co-acquiring, co-producing. Let's look at different, maybe different partnerships with TV channels. There are some sort of consolidation in that area going on right now. You know, RAI and France Television and several entities I know in Scandinavia. You know, you guys are all working together on the TV side. So let's think about partnerships. I don't think, you know, if for example, Studio Canal signed an output deal worldwide or blanket across Europe with Netflix, you know, how would that work? I don't think that would work. But maybe there's a way to find partnerships to make to answer that difficult question. Does that make sense?
It does. It's Isabel, then Asger.
Yeah, just have one for Anna as well. I mean, of course, European companies or distribution companies face that problem with distribution, but do you think the reverse thing is also right for indie producers in the United States going to Europe?
Just to add complication to that question, yeah. Isabel.
Well, I was just going to make the point that, I mean, it's one thing to assume that, let's say Netflix, when they buy all rights to all territories, are making an absolute success of international distribution, but we don't know because we don't have the data.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it might simply be that they're making, you know, huge audience numbers in one or two territories. Actually, we would say, we had a film recently that we supported very heavily called Been So Long by a second-time British director called Tinge Kristen. The film got bought by Netflix. We're really happy that it was. It's a fantastic film, but it's one that is really going to find its absolutely right audience on Netflix. So it's a fantastic result for everyone concerned, actually, including the audience. But it'll be interesting to see what we can learn. And I mean, I think it's interesting that Lucia is sort of encouraging us through the next program to look at data again. Perhaps that's the way in which we can support more effectively European networks. But again, just to add to the streaming point, I mean, we've also had a very sort of productive relationship with Amazon. We've co-financed with them. They seem to want to join the party as opposed to sit separately. But I'd also say, I mean, not necessarily as a provocation, but an observation that the British filmmakers that I know who've worked with Netflix speak really highly of them. They're enjoying the creative control that they've been given, creative independence, the budgets that, you know, for now they have no problem in, you know, they're not fighting for every penny. So for now there's some, you know, great opportunities for filmmakers, which I guess challenges our models.
So the last point really I wanted to bring up, which is, it links into the whole streaming debate, is the data. You mentioned data. So yeah, those companies are built around, like Amazon, the retailer, is built around data, understanding consumer pattern behavior, what they want to watch. Is that a good thing? Or does that, in a way, could it stifle creativity by funneling us all into sort of, you know, this is what you like, this is what you have to watch? You know, so this data is good, it's great. How do we make more use of it? And certainly, how does exhibitors get the data they have back to producers? That's one area I'd like to ask her to mention. But is the creativity element of data, is that a risk or not?
Who's that for me?
Yeah,
Or for
well,
John? Yeah. I
whoever,
was hoping
jump
John
in.
would answer that
Someone
question.
jump in.
He should answer it. I think there's a risk there, but it's not a new debate. This idea of, should decisions about which films get made be production push or distribution pull has been going on for literally decades. And I think there is a risk of diminishing returns if you start to use algorithms to decide which films should get made. Nobody knows what anyone's going to watch next. And again, if we're looking at newer audiences, they're the ones who are going to respond to the original. And certainly within the realm of European content, where it's only rarely going to be a really established IP, that's really where you have to rely upon the originality of the filmmakers if you're in the end going to have a success. So, but I think people are smart enough to figure that out. I mean, I remember, it's a slightly different example, but in China, where of course the streaming platforms are gods, and they were just figuring out what they could bring to the production decision-making process, not only from the numbers on the streaming platforms, but from the fact that some of them also own the equivalents to Google and eBay and Amazon and PayPal. In the end, you know what? 3 years later, they're all making films that they think people want to see.
And I would just say to that don't forget that we are in a prototype business. So without the data, you need to test and learn, because we're in this prototype business. The franchise business is slightly different, and obviously the data is ensuring that they're making the right movies for that square public. But just one thing, just the Vivendi Group, we're lucky because we're working with Havas. They're an advertising company. They've got a whole bunch of data, and we are starting to work more and more with data, but keeping in mind that creative freedom, and that we can't do without that in the film businesses, and that's why we're all in it, and that's the art of what we love doing.
Yeah,
so it needs to be a balance.
And just the last question actually to Asger. So the idea of production and exhibition talking, do they talk enough? Do you talk to do producers come and see you enough about what you know about audiences?
Can't say if we do enough. I just recall one experience actually I had with you, David. A year ago, the screen technicians here from Europe visited the Photographers Guild in Hollywood. Yeah. And there couldn't actually be a group of professionals that were further apart in this value chain. But even then, they had a lot to speak about. And it's actually obvious that the screen technicians and the photographers, they have a lot to talk about. We definitely need to talk more with each other. Also, a point we haven't really mentioned here is investments. Investments in enhancing technology that will enhance the experience for the moviegoers. Years ago, Atmos was introduced, and I remember that the discussion with the investment in our post-production company was, well, how many cinemas have installed Atmos? Because that would actually motivate the investment in Atmos for our post-production facilities. And this is a conference for exhibitors, and I would say that our continued investment would have to be done in dialogue with the film producers, the distributors, and the post-production companies in order for all of us to make the right investments and don't waste money here.
Thank you, Asger. So just to wrap up then, just briefly before we start the next session, before I thank the panel, just need to know that after this session, I hope you know that Event Cinema is back within this Cine Europe, and as part of that, next up, there's Cineplace, which is a marketplace for event cinema, in partnership with the ECA, the Event Cinema Association. They're going to show a show reel. So as soon as we finish this panel, there'll be a show reel of event cinema content. But I'd like to thank my panel. It's quite a tough question, the European question, European content, and understanding how to make it successful, and maybe understanding that it's not always possible, I guess. Sometimes it's about nationality, sometimes it's about territoriality, sometimes it's about getting things wider. I think the fundamental part, what we just learned there, I guess, is that there are times when you can make things more successful and more widely seen. And it's understanding that those times when you can do that and trying to tap into that and create the structures, probably the joined up structures. Maybe it's the case that people, things are a bit too segmented, a bit too siloed. Production, distribution, exhibition, I've used the terms myself. Things are siloed, then they don't necessarily talk. So I think it's maybe there's ways in which we can make communication between all the different parts of the industry a bit easier, a bit better, and create structures that actually bring them together. But I'd like to thank Isabel, John, Anna, and Asger for their contributions this morning, and thank you to the audience for listening. Thank you.
No man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come.
60 years ago, my uncle, John F. Kennedy, put forth a great challenge.
We will finish what we have started.
We want major breakthroughs to revitalize NASA and its mission.
Since then, NASA has rocketed to the heavens, landing rovers on distant planets, launching telescopes deep into space, so that we can look back to the beginning of time.
It's going to take NASA making a different kind of commitment.
SpaceX, NASA turns to the private sector.
This is beyond just exploration. This is actually designed to protect the Earth.
All the while peering back down on Earth to keep watch on the health of our planet. Always asking, where do we come from? Are we alone? What will become of us?
We really are acting out our humanity.
We don't want to be surprised.